Sí,
Sí, que hay traducción de inglés.
por favor,
Please be seated.
vayan tomando asiento, que vamos a empezar. Primero, un pequeño.
First of all, an announcement. We have English and Spanish simultaneous interpretation. If you require this, please pick up your headset to follow. And I understand that we're also broadcasting, so we're seen live outside this room. I will kick off. And the first thing is to welcome you. Most of you have been at ECLAC for several days enjoying the third COP of the Escazú Agreement. And this conversation is framed within the side activities to this conference. Before beginning to speak about this conversation, I would like to thank the government of Mexico because they have led the organization. But also I would like to thank German cooperation that have always been supporting us at ECLAC regarding gender mainstreaming and also issues related to sustainable development, sustainable mining, and others, ensuring activities in the region. Also, the foreign ministries of Chile and Colombia and Germany, these countries have had a very active feminist foreign policy and are leaders in the region. The case of Germany and Europe. So we have 3 countries plus Germany that may make a difference in this topic, moving ahead and setting the pace for other countries. I would like to thank Anna Westmers, who is our Director of the Gender Affairs Division, because this work at ECLAC is led by this division, and this is the division that mainstreams all of these teams to the rest and have helped us learn so much in recent years about this topic. In addition to telling you a bit about the relevance of this event, which is what I will do now, I would like to mention that we will have in the inaugural ceremony a few words recorded by our Executive Secretary, Jose Manuel Salazar, who on account of the COP had to leave suddenly for New York. But since this activity had been prepared before and he was thinking of being at the COP, and so we were able to record a video, and also we are pleased to have a video by Lisa Bárcena, who is the Mexican Secretary of Foreign Affairs and who used to be our Executive Secretary at ECLAC. So we can say that it's all at home. And to conclude before the videos, because it will be said there, and you know far more about the topic than me, I did want to mention the milestone at the COP having adopted a decision on this. And that, by the way, was also driven forward by Mexico, immediately supported by the presiding officers, because this was something that was brought forward by the presiding officers and that was accompanied by all parties. I do have some messages regarding the decision. It implies a lot of work to be done, and I hope that everyone here will join in doing it. Concretely, we need to report on the situation. And this was one of my reclamations before several colleagues in ECLAC and also several accompanying the topic. This must go paragraph by paragraph of the Escazú Agreement and see where we have gender disparities and difficulties so that different people may not, don't, but we must ensure that everyone has the same rights. So this is something that we should present at a future COP, and must be a careful, detailed work where we address the topics and addressing the niches to resolve these inequalities and present possible solutions for the parties. And please, let's focus on the paragraphs of the Escazú Agreement as well, and all be informed. Well, and so Thanking you once again for being here. I would now like colleagues to put on the first video by José Manuel Salazar Sirinax to hear his words. Good afternoon, everyone who's with us today at the ECLAC offices, as well as the live broadcast of the conversation on the women in the Escazú Agreement. This is a historical milestone for our region and the world, not only because it is the first environmental treaty at regional level and that has specific provisions for the promotion and protection of defenders of human rights and environmental matters, but also because it focuses on the implementation, the creation and strengthening of capacities and cooperation and the need of groups living in vulnerable situations. There are 3 meetings of the COP, and these have led efforts by the parties and the public to achieve the goals of the agreement. Mainstreaming the gender approach is essential in the processes for national implementation of access, rights to information, participation, and justice, as well as the full inclusion of women in decision-making with regards to the environment. And as discussed at COP3, it is indispensable to establish synergies between the Escazú Agreement and the Regional Gender Agenda, a very deep, ambitious, and integral agenda to move towards gender equality and autonomy of women, built over 45 years through the agreements adopted by governments at the regional conference. Women in Latin America and the Caribbean. In the last meeting held in 2022, the countries of the region adopted the Buenos Aires Agreement, and where countries agreed to move ahead towards the care society. The care society locates at the heart the sustainability of life and the planet and recognizes the interdependence between people and the environmental, economic, and social dimensions of sustainable development. My friends, at ECLAC, we believe that sustainable development is not possible without the full and effective participation by women, and therefore the Escazú Agreement is so important to ensure that right. I would also like to especially thank women for their role, especially those who defend human rights and environmental matters. Their role they play in defending and caring for the planet, peace, and territories in the midst of so many difficulties. Precisely moving ahead with the national plans for the implementation of the Escazú Agreement is an opportunity to effectively ensure access rights, establish mechanisms, processes, and spaces to recognize the role of women in defending the environment, and integrating the gender equality perspective in environmental matters. Investing in gender equality and the care society is essential, not only on account of justice and inclusion, but also because as a strategic investment in order to dynamize the economy and to speed up progress towards sustainable development. In Latin America and the Caribbean, 1 in 4 women does not have an income of their own, almost 3 times more than men. Among first quintile women, almost 40% do not have any type of monetary income of their own. The region moved ahead in parity in education, and women, in fact, have more years of study on average than men. However, this is not yet reflected in their full participation in the economy, politics, science, technology, and other fields. For example, half of women are outside the labor market in comparison to the share of men, close to 65%. And women dedicate almost 3 times as much time as men to household and unpaid work, and young women have higher rates of unemployment and job precariousness than men. And these differences are even great when there are children at home, and which shows that the trend is not being turned around. The current world requires urgent transformations, beginning with putting an end to the historical exclusion of women in all spheres of society. The Escazú Agreement is a new tool to move ahead in that direction. And gender equality is a necessary condition to achieve a more productive, inclusive, and sustainable future for Latin America and the Caribbean. Everyone together, we may achieve it. Thank you for your attention.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. And now we move on to the second video of our dear former Executive Secretary of ECLAC, Alisa Bárcena. My dear friends, and it is difficult to express the emotion I feel at this moment, be part of this third meeting of the COP of the Escazú Agreement at the home of our ECLAC. It fills me with joy to greet my former colleagues, exceptional men and women, with whom we have been struggling for decades to build development models that are inclusive, compatible, and in solidarity with life on the planet. I am very pleased to know that there are also groups of young people, indigenous people, the silent guardians of the earth, and biodiversity. They initiated and indeed maintain the vitality of this cause, which is a cause of all humanity. I can't be with you, but I send you this message with great affection on this important day, Earth Day. Mother Earth Day, propitious day to remember our work, the years we traveled down this road, the satisfactions and milestones reached. Those of us who have been personally involved in this issue know that no part of Agenda 21 or the Sustainable Development Agenda has been easy to implement. Turning principles into reality is a winding path with more than a few difficulties and frustrations. But the obstacles we've encountered have never been sufficient to stop us, because we know that these principles are the path to follow, the path of solidarity, balance, and respect for our planet. Every day there are more and more of us from different areas who believe in and are joining the Escazú project. I would like to highlight the ongoing commitment shown by the government of my country, Mexico, throughout the process of achieving Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration, long before we began to talk about a powerful, legally binding document such as this one. Let us not forget that the Escazú Agreement is an exceptional achievement of the entire region, whose third conference is being held today successfully. Mexico was one of the pioneers of the 9 countries that almost 12 years ago at the Rio +20 conference supported the adoption of the Declaration on the Application of Principle 10 on Environment and Development in Latin America and the Caribbean. This milestone laid the groundwork for a roadmap that culminated in the drafting of the Escazú Agreement, which has now been signed by 2/3 of the countries of the region, representing more than 90% of our region's population. I would also like to welcome Mexico's part in including one of the most important aspects of this Escazú Agreement, which is what makes it unique in the world: the obligation to protect environmental human rights defenders in environmental matters, those who give life for life. It is the least we can do for those who risk their safety to defend the planet. And despite our problems and differences and disadvantages, our region is still at the forefront in making accurate, innovative, and necessary contributions to strengthening the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. As Mexico's Foreign Secretary, I am especially proud to be part of the presentation of the decision on mainstreaming the gender perspective in the Escazú Agreement. Yet another battle, this one to include one of the most notorious elements of structural inequality, which limits access to natural resources and land tenure and resource ownership. And this is the prevalence of patriarchal privileges and gender violence. In Mexico, only 3 out of every 10 people who own communal land are women. And the imbalance of ownership limits access to representation and financial services, and even to such basic services such as energy or water. This is despite the fact that women have historically been responsible for conserving biodiversity, from storing needs to domesticating plants, obtaining water, caring for animals, and preparing food, among many other tasks. And so we're presenting this initiative because a world that excludes women is a world that denies itself. That is why Mexico supports this vision. It is also in line with our feminist foreign policy, which takes a humanist, pacifist, and human rights approach, including protecting and ensuring the right to a healthy environment. Our proposal stems from a clear recognition of the relationship between gender equality, environmental protection, and the right to information and justice. This initiative makes more visible the women's important participation throughout the process of drafting the Escazú Agreement and its entry into force. I have no doubt that approval of this proposal keeps alive and strengthens the spirit of the Escazú Agreement. We are prioritizing our defense of the most vulnerable, but also the most powerful people who are having an impact on public conservation during this change of era which concerns us all and calls to us all. I would like to congratulate all delegations and thank them for joining in. I thank Jimena Mariscal. I know that when those of us who are certain that a better world is possible, we come together. Sooner or later, we will reach our goal. Today is a day to celebrate, and I'm glad we're doing so at ECLAC. And in closing, I would like to paraphrase the poem La Tierra, the Earth by Gabriela Mostral, and which I hope will inspire you as it has inspired me. It goes, all taking, all bearing, the holy back of the earth, that which walks, that which sleeps, that frolics and grieves, carries the living and carries the dead, the Indian drum of the earth. And if you hold your breath as if you were all or nothing, you will hear her arm go up that had me and that gives me away, and the mother that was broken, you will see her come back home. Thank you, and I wish you much success.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much to both the Executive Secretary and to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mexico for their remarks. I'd like to mention a couple of things. They said a decision was approved, and curiously enough, our Executive Secretary backs this decision. They both backed the decision. They support it. It wasn't clear that we would approve it, but they both expected it would. But there are a few points they mentioned that are very important. The national implementation. There's other decisions on national implementation. The transnationalization of gender is very important for these national plans.
Para la protección de personas defensoras de derechos humanos en asuntos.
And therefore, there must be a focus on these discussions and what we discussed at the COP. So Maria Fernanda from the Chamber for the Green Agenda, from the Secretariat of Foreign Affairs of Mexico, has been leading with us at the Secretariat this proposal at the COP, which has supported Mexico. Mexico has been supported by several other areas of the government as well. But I wanted to acknowledge that at the table we have several other parties which are part of the board. Antigua and Barbuda. We also have Irene, who is the representative of the public, and she is part of the steering committee. We also have on the other side St. Lucia, which is also part of the board, it's the steering committee, and the board is very much, or the steering committee is very much present and committed to this matter, and we have a group of defenders, such as the case of Chile, which will most certainly include this into the group work. Maria Fernanda, you have the floor. Thank you, Carlos. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much for all the support that ECLAC has given us, especially the proposal by the Secretariat, you, of course. And I'd like to congratulate all of us because this is joint work, it is teamwork. Mexico presented a session proposal that was created by the public, which was devised by the public. You were the ones that helped us standardize the needs and the demands, the interests that exist, that remain with society, so that gender perspective can go beyond a mere discourse. It actually permeates everything we do, and we're starting to execute this in order to implement the Escazú Agreement. We would not have been able to do this without the support of so many of you. So the public, thank you. It's a huge group. I'm not going to name anyone specifically. All of the public has worked incessantly to collect all these needs and comments. Thank you for trusting in Mexico so that we would be the ones to propose your request. This reaffirms our leadership, the trust that has been placed in us, in this leadership of Mexico, and the fact that in the steering committee we have this support confirms it. Thank you to all of the steering committee members that have shown immediate support. We really had no obstacles in making this a reality during the conference.
Invertir más tiempo en...
I don't really want to take up more time. I'd just like to say that this accent on gender needs to permeate everything we do. We've heard it, we know it, now we're all here to begin this conversation, to understand and to dialogue and exchange points of view on how we materialize this, how we carry this out. It is a huge pending agenda. There's a lot of work ahead of us, and I am the first to say you have all my support, and all of us who are here today will do our best to make it a reality and to have more tangible work as soon as possible. I would like to thank Jimena. She's our coordinator, national coordinator of the feminist policies, and it is a very active feminist policy. Don't be sidetracked by the books. We wish to work with this in every forum possible. Let's work hand in hand with everyone in this room, with everyone who is with us in spirit as well, so that we can make this a reality. Thank you, Jimena. We have a huge task ahead of us. And Ana, thank you for all your support. We will work to make it a reality. Thank you to everyone else who accepted the challenge, because the only change that was made yesterday during the negotiations was when we added this mention so that it not only be done by the Secretariat, of course, led by women. So thank you. Thank you for expressing your support. It is not merely your impression. Yesterday, I had no doubt that this is important for all. So thank you, and let's begin working together.
Para concluir, resaltar esto que...
Just to conclude, I'd like to stress what Maria Fernanda said yesterday. Both UN Women, UNDP, UNEP, who are all present here, as well as many other agencies of the system, offered their support to our work. It's on the record, so they can't get away. I'd like to offer the floor to Ana Westmis. She leads gender affairs here at ECLAC, and of course she is the utmost specialist in these matters. You have the floor, Ana. Good afternoon. I have to say that it is so interesting to say that we have all contributed with a grain and in our own way to the Escazú Agreement. It is a region that is moving towards a horizon of sustainability and equality. But the question now, and that is what the panel will be about, is how to make this faster, how to do it in a more significant manner. That's why making a decision and taking all these measures, actions, activities led to achieve this gender perspective in all forms through the Escazú Agreement is a starting point, and the idea is for the parties to continue to implement the full participation of women in all their diversity, including indigenous women, and the inclusion of gender perspective in the application of the agreement. This is a region that systematically takes the multilateral fora, takes to these fora the idea of a diverse region where we would like all women, girls, youth to participate. This conversation is also the first activity that Mexico, Chile, Colombia, and Germany carry out together with ECLAC in a triangular effort called Strengthening of the Cooperation Policies at an international and feminist level through a practice community. It's a practice community that is seeking to advance faster so that this legal obligation that all the states have to achieve gender equality through the law and in facts becomes a reality. We will have two segments. A first segment where we will hear the experience of the countries, how they're doing, what difficulties we have, what is working, and at a second instance, we will have comments from the UN system, from the GIZ, and the International Union for Environmental Conservation. So let's begin by hearing the countries' presentations, beginning by Paula Fuentes Merino, who is an international affairs officer of the Ministry of the Environment in Chile. You have the floor, Paula.
Muchas gracias. Muy buenas tardes a todas y a todos.
Good afternoon, all. We would like to join in your thanks to ECLAC, to Ana, to Mexico for all your leadership in the organization of this event. This very important activity and the leadership that you've had in driving this conversation on mainstreaming gender affairs. Thank you to the feminist organizations and civil society. I know you worked on this for a long time, and we know how much work it has been. So thank you. Yes, thank you. They invited us to comment on what we've done here in Chile with our recently launched implementation plan, a participative plan by the Escazú Agreement, and what efforts we've made to integrate a gender perspective in all the measures that we defined for this plan and in the implementation of the same. As you know, Chile has a feminist foreign policy whose main objective is to establish gender equality and inclusion as a main principle in strengthening democracy and human rights.
It is in this context that our
Responde a este
response to this international acknowledgement, as well as the acknowledgement that at national level we are giving to the integration of the gender approach in our environmental public policies, as well as human rights approach. Therefore, maybe I have some comments of what we have already shared in COP3 with regard to the implementation plan at participatory level that was recently launched. It was shared by the Undersecretary in the segment of national implementation, where he was commenting on how we plan that we defined from 2024 to 2030 is to determine how Chile wants to move in the full implementation of the Escazú Agreement and its 5 pillars in terms of access to information, public participation, access to justice, protection of environmental defenders, and of course, with regard to the strengthening of capacity and cooperation. This plan was created, or was co-constructed rather, with a collaborative work and coordinated with 34 public organizations of the state. And it also had the special participation of the civil society, academia, private sector, and of course, defenders of the environment in different territories. This is public policy of the state. It is not a plan that only belongs to the Environment Ministry, but rather 34 public organizations that have included ambitious commitments that are all reachable in this specific period of time. To obtain this plan, we had different participatory activities. We started a consultation period of time. It was early participation, and another one, a public consultation that lasted around 8 months, and we received something like, or the participation was of 3,000 people, out of which 60% were women and girls. This is a plan that is really supported by women and girls. What we did was hear their problems or issues. We identified the gaps of women and girls in environmental aspects, and we integrated them through responses and specific means that we wanted to reflect in this plan. I wanted to comment some of these measures, to share some of the measures and specific commitments that we currently have in our plan. It is 56 general measures. Whenever you have the opportunity to review them, you will be able to see how there are 56 general measures and more than 336 specific institutional commitments that are taken into consideration. These measures, we of course held specific workshops for women, with women as well, in transition areas that have high sensitivity in environmental matters. We also held workshops for children in specific areas. We identified different gaps in terms of gender, especially when considering the difficulties of women when dealing with the public information, with the digital access, as it was mentioned here by other women, gaps in terms of participation, given the unequal burden of responsibilities in care and domestic activities, which was quite evident in our workshops, as well as this meant an additional burden that needed to be taken into consideration in this area, and the different difficulties that rural women expressed in the different participation instances. In the plan, you will be able to see that the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality have many different participations. This is quite intentional in acknowledging that the mainstreaming gender approach and the responsibility of it, it is not lying only in the organizations and mechanisms for women, but rather how they should be supporting the other organizations of the state by integrating the gender commitment in our policies and activities. There are many different supports from different ministries of work, agriculture, in the application of their activities. We have some measures such as strengthening the different mechanisms and tools that allow the participation of the public by considering the special economic, geographical, and gender characteristics, as well with carrying out different actions and promotion and sensitization campaigns that respond to these specific characteristics, and that of course will promote defending the environment. But we have specific actions that the ministries themselves defined. It was done quite autonomously, but quite ambitious. For example, Education Ministry established a commitment related to the promotion and generation of thought processes related to environment issues, integrating scientific women and different participants in generating an environmental science with a gender perspective in our country. The Ministry of Women is committed to guarantee access to environmental information to the diversity of women by understanding this diversity as rural women, indigenous, of the different diversities, and the environmental impact system or service is committed to create specific participation of citizens, but facilitating women, and the Science Ministry is establishing a commitment to consolidate what the Science Ministry calls the Council of Children and Youth, which is an exchange area and advisory area for the authorities to take into account the different problems that the children are expressing. The challenge then in Chile is to implement this roadmap. These actions that really took a long time to define. It was very well coordinated, and of course the different supports, recommendations, coordinations with the agencies, with the civil society, with the academia will all be key. So thank you very much. Thank you, Paula Fuentes Merino, International Affairs Officer of the Environment Ministry, for this very important exercise of including the gender perspective of the different pillars, measures, and commitments, and something that we have mentioned in this agenda, the importance of mechanisms for women, in this case, the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality in Chile, are all involved in the process. We will not have too much time to comment the measures, but it is what we will be talking about later on. Without further ado, then I will offer the floor to Ana Maria Llorente Valbuena. She is the Undersecretary of Assessment of Environmental Activities in Colombia. Thank you and good afternoon. I, of course, thank Mexico and back my colleague from Chile, and thank you, ECLAC, for inviting me. My representation here is not only as Undersecretary, but as woman understanding all these processes where Escazú becomes far more evident, and that is the process related to the project feasibility, all related to the territories where the works will be carried out, work that will be impacting and changing lives, especially for indigenous territories, farmers, and others that are quite susceptible to all these problems in my country. And I want to repeat, and many of those here understand the situation of Colombia. We signed the agreement and it was ratified through a law by the Congress, and we are expecting or waiting for the Constitutional Court. This on April 26 will hold a public hearing to establish the arguments that the court requires for the process that are already was presented in the Congress becomes a reality, and now we become a state party. Nonetheless, the director of the environmental licenses and myself as Undersecretary, we created a space for the challenges that Colombia is confronting in terms of the defenders, the women defenders specifically, the ones that defend environment and human rights, that have really given their lives in defending their environments. And it is shown in the numbers of international organizations where we see that in 2022, Colombia was in first place of deaths of environmental defenders, a number that has been exponentially growing given the lack of security and support of the state with them. Numbers where women are included. They are women leaders that even though they have additional tasks as women in their family roles within the rural areas mentioned by the Secretary General of ECLAC, he mentioned something that is called economy of care. He was giving numbers by saying that women use three times, their time is three times used in care and household activities, even though women have this role, and especially for rural women in Colombia. Their energy and their leadership in many of the areas of the country is so important that they leave the tasks of their households to be environmental activists. I would like to express some important issues from my perspective and from the status in which the Escazú Agreement is found when waiting for that freeway of the Constitutional Court. We are creating different plans. I am talking about the environmental entity, the first public entity to establish an action plan for Escazú, where each of the stakeholders related to the environmental matters have obligations with the four principles of the agreement: access to information, participation, because without information, there's no participation. Without participation, there's no environmental justice. And of course, the core of this, especially for a country that is affected as Colombia, where we saw in a note from Spain that Colombia was the largest graveyard of environmental leaders. And I would like to tell a story how we have had the difficulty of creating plans, official plans, given that we're waiting for the Constitutional Court. My role as an activist in my past, I had been working for 10 years as an environmental activist, and as a woman, I undoubtedly believe, as many of those that are here present, that women have a main role in the perspective that exists on the need of mainstreaming, as the title of this workshop mentions. Mainstreaming is to go from one side to the other, to transfer empowerment of one participant to be able to be cross-cutting activities with others, most of them men, which we of course do not deny men's leadership, but in Colombia with the experience so we have had, and in Latin America with many leaders, I do remember they have been murdered, and leaders that now are the flagship of environmental activism.
El reto.
I now recognize the challenge of going from activism into a civil servant, and from the inside be able to lead, having these two views of the importance of caring for the environment and the responsibility for the women's vision of protection, of the responsibilities in taking care of territory. Francia Marquez, our vice president, the first Afro-descendant vice president of the country, was also an activist, and she now has a very important role to play in not only differentiating, in bringing in a different focus, a differential focus into the midst of public authorities. And this differential focus is important. Let me tell you that ALA has done something that may sound trivial, but it's not. We have public hearings where we have two parties, the company and the players who are against the project, and the authorities. We all sit at the same table, and that was done without the need to have new standards. What we have done is set up a differential kind of focus, giving priority to women, girls, persons, LGBTQ1 plus, people with disabilities, and these have the priority to intervene before the others. So this is a big change in the participation and access to information in spaces, and that is as of ANLA. We also have very interesting data. The authority has figures related to the positions of standing. 59% of the positions are taken up by women, and we're very proud of that. And this is going to bring in a big change for what's happening in the territories. And the under division that is under me, there also 51% of all collaborators are women. Undoubtedly, the environmental issue under the focus of licensee that is following Escazú. And many of these cases are related to extraction projects. We're talking about mining, hydrocarbons, infrastructure projects that have begged information that is easily accessed, that is transparent, with a gender focus, with more participation through these public hearings. And there are spaces with the authorities where eventually the companies don't intervene anymore. And why? Because often the community does not trust the company. So we end up having a dialogue between public authorities and the community. All of this has allowed us to have transparent access to information, which is so important, transparent and participatory. And when this happens, there we have environmental justice. In Colombia, this is what we want to achieve. Throughout the national government in Colombia, we have decided to act accordingly. And I'm now speaking as of my own office. It's been a tremendous challenge, but we women have set our stamp in developing this tremendous work amongst the authorities, government authorities. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Ana Maria Llorente, for showing us what is being done at the Division of Environmental Licenses Evaluation in Colombia. And thank you very much for the contribution. Colombia is now recognizing defenders of human rights, women who defend life, peace, territories, and how to go forward with that kind of leadership. We were able to also hear Francia Marquez, the vice president that was awarded one of the most important prizes in that she was at the Inter-American Court defending the relation between the right to a healthy environment and the right to care. So this is part of what's happening and what we're working on, searching for transformation in social, environmental, and economic fields. And in closing state's experiences, it is an honor now to hand over to Antigua and Barbuda. That is one of the countries that is taking up one of the vice chairs of the presiding officers of Escazú. We have a translation from English to Spanish, Spanish-English for those who so require.
She is Senator Parliamentary Secretary for Legal Affairs of Antigua and Barbuda. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I too would like to join in and thank Mexico, Chile, Colombia, and Germany for all the hard work they've done to bring gender mainstreaming to the forefront, and of course, ECLAC for all the support they give. Now, it's very important. Gender mainstreaming is very important. To achieve equality for sustainable future, the Sustainable Development Goals number 5 speaks about achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. Now, sorry, oh, it's that. Sorry. Oh, I'm very sorry. You've all been getting feedback. I do apologize. Sorry, no, I'm speaking French now. Yeah, sorry. No, it's okay. Sorry about that. I'm just saying that I express my thanks to Germany, Chile, Mexico and Colombia for bringing this issue of gender mainstreaming to the forefront. That's okay. Yeah. So I was just saying that the importance of gender equality for a sustainable future has been established in the Sustainable Goals number 5. It speaks about achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. And we should realize that this is not a standalone objective, but it's important in respect to achieving all the other goals. And, you know, it also relates to environmental challenges. Now, when we speak of gender mainstreaming, it's important that we understand that mainstreaming is a strategy for ensuring that governments and authorities pursue gender equality in all aspects of the development process to achieve the vision of a gender-responsive society where men and women equally contribute and benefit from development. And the gender perspective must be considered in every decision that's made by governments and authorities. The gender perspective must be looked at in the preparation and design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and regulatory practices and measures, and especially spending programs with a view to promoting equality between men and women and ending discrimination. Now, to achieve this, to get women at the table, when I say I want women at the table, I mean participating, not to be a token that you say we have a committee and we have women there. We need to make sure that we have gender-sensitive language in our legislation. We need to make sure we have gender-specific data collection and analysis. This is important because if you don't have the correct data, you won't see where your gaps are or how to improve. Women and men need to have equal access and utilization of services. And as I say, women should be equally involved in the decision-making process. Historical and structural gender inequalities have imposed different social responsibilities and expectations between men and women. And let's face it, we live in a society where we have a power structure and men are there, and that's very much so in the Caribbean, and I'm sure very much so in other countries. And gender inequality means that women are more negatively impacted in every which way you look at life. If there's a heat wave, it's the women who have to deal with the children, the house, everything. If there's flooding, it's the women who have to be looking after the house. And lots of women in the Caribbean, especially in Antigua, are farmers. So when you have flooding and heat, it affects how they can make a living to feed their families. And we have I'll be blunt, we have a history of one-parent families, and women are usually the head of the families, and that puts extra pressure and stress on them. So the problem I see is that they don't have sufficient room to make decisions. In the Caribbean, well, in Antigua, it was only in 2004 we had a female parliamentarian elected to our lower house, which is where lots of decisions are made. Unfortunately, we still only have one. We had two in 2014, I believe. But the point I'm making, if you have men making decisions about everything, you don't have the female perspective, you're going to have a very biased decisions which don't actually look out for women and see how they are impacted. When there are discussions about domestic violence, sexual abuse, even abortion, even in the States, you look at the TV and it's men discussing it. They don't have a female body, but they're the ones making decisions and deciding who should do this, who shouldn't do that. And I'm saying that women need to think that we just haven't arrived, that we have a right to be there. That's why I say, I don't want to be a token. I don't want to be on any committee or anything where I'm just there because I'm a black woman or because I'm a woman, because we have to guard against that you put women, well, men put women on committees for the sake of saying, I fulfilled a quota and I can tick that. No, we have to make sure that we have women there and we are listening to them so that when a decision is made, I may say, well, look, this is a glass. And then a woman may say, well, no, I need a smaller glass or a glass with a different shape. It may be something small, but it makes a big difference. And for me, when women are at the table, it will encourage the younger generation. When young girls see women at the table making a decision, then they look and they think, that could be me. They don't think it's just not possible. And so that's very important. And what I'm seeing is this, in Antigua, we have lots of civil society organizations and NGOs. The majority of them are filled with women. And yet, when decisions are made and NGOs are supposed to be involved, they kind of I wouldn't say sideline, but it's like their voices are not up there, their voices are down there. When in truth and in fact, they're the ones dealing with doing the groundwork. They're not involved in the policy, because sometimes you can have a policy, but if you have a policy and you don't understand how it is going to impact in a practical measure, it is a waste of time. So that's why I believe it's very important that this idea of having women gender mainstreaming, focusing, because sometimes you can be dealing, I have children, and sometimes I will say something and they will respond in a different way, and I'll be like, oh, I never saw it like that, because they're seeing it from a totally different perspective. And I think that in all my negotiations through the Escazú process, I have to say, women have been at the forefront, our voices have been listened to, and I want it to continue. I think we can go even deeper. And the problem I'm seeing in the Caribbean, well, in Antigua, is that we're lacking statistics. And I know UN Women have worked with us to help us to get statistics, because if you don't have the necessary statistics, you won't get the funding and you won't get the support. It's going to be very hard to prove to a UN agency or any agency that you need assistance to teach young girls how to think forward and how to see themselves as leaders if you don't have the information to support it. And also, as we all know, as I've said, women are affected by climate change, and yet not so much in the Caribbean yet, and I hope it never happens, that they have to be harassed sexually or, face gender-specific violence. The gender-specific name-calling is one of the issues why women have not been in the forefront of politics in the Caribbean, because, people can be very mean, they can be very nasty. And I think this is important, that women understand, yes, you will be called a name, but it doesn't matter. And that the more women we see in positions of power, in leadership, in environment, the more women will come. It only takes one, then 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it becomes a norm. It becomes an option for a young girl to think, I can be a champion, I can be a leader in the environment, in female issues, anything. So I think that, as I said at the beginning, tokenism is not what we're looking for. We're looking to be at the table and to have our voices heard. And I think it's important, especially for us in the Caribbean, to be involved in politics. And we had a very progressive director of gender affairs, and she dragged me along with her, and we had set up the Caribbean Institute of Women in Leadership. And it was as a consequence of that we had a 2004 female politician elected. Now, unfortunately, once she went to a better position or higher position, the institute kind of dwindled, but it's been restored, and the base is in Trinidad, actually. Nana Hesse. And you see, that's important, because just from the idea that our gender affairs director had, we managed to get a female elected. And then, you had lots of women becoming head of organizations, and then there was a kind of increase in the promotion of women in the government in PS positions. So I think it's really important that, yes, we need policies, but we need to get in to where the policies are made, so that we can have an impact, so that when we have laws, as I said, they should be gender sensitive. They should be aware of what's happening. And also this issue of collecting data is, for the Caribbean, for Antigua, is critical, because lots of things happen, and you can read it in the papers, you can hear it on the radio, but when you actually look for an official document, it's lacking. So I'm going to end there because time is short, but I just want to say that gender mainstream is very important. I think we have to keep talking about it, because I believe you must keep talking about something, because I have decided that if you tell me something once I don't hear it, the second time I don't hear it, if you keep telling me, it'll be in my head, whether I think I'm hearing it or not. I think that's very important. So I support anything and everything to do with gender mainstreaming. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Secretary for Justice and Legal Affairs of Antigua and Barbuda, for such a very inspiring message and reminding us of the importance of statistics and analysis. We all say that what you don't measure does not exist, and without a doubt, breaking the statistical silence and having sounder, stronger statistics in terms of gender is essential. Not recalling the relevance of women's engagement in all powers of the state. And still, although this is a region that does move towards parity, it is not yet achieved, at least in many countries. And that too is a great contribution that the region has made towards the rest of the world. And now, and I believe we have a little more flexibility with the time, although we are running a bit late, because Carlos de Miguel told me that afterwards there are no further activities, and so we could stay a little later. But we will try to keep with the same pace and move on to the comments. We have asked each discussant to be brief, because I know there are so many things to talk about, and no more than 3 minutes. I would like to begin with Karina Kusel, who is the director for the German Corporation for International Cooperation in the South Coast. Go ahead. Good afternoon and greetings to all participants. My co-panelists, Anna, Carlos, it is a pleasure to be here once again, and thank you very much for the invitation. First, I would really like to congratulate you for the approval of the decision on gender mainstreaming to move towards a more equitable and sustainable Escazú Agreement. A truly excellent achievement. And also I hope that this decision may decisively contribute towards a more responsible decision-making by governments, ensuring safe settings for the defense of human rights and environmental matters, and specifically preventing gender violence against women defenders. And as my co-panelist, I would like to highlight the relevance of inclusion of the gender perspective, be included at all levels and be framed within international commitments, policies and strategies at national level, including a connection between national governments and multilateral agencies. However, what's essential is the implementation, and also in particular at local level. Strengthening the real implementation of the gender perspective will lead to transforming changes addressing the structural causes of gender inequity. This is a priority for the German government, even more so under its current administration. And with this purpose in mind, to transform things, strategic outlook, a feminist policy was determined, a feminist foreign policy, but for development. It is within this framework that the GTZ of Germany approved at the beginning of March a triangular cooperation project, which is already mentioned. It was prepared by ECLAC, by Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. And really, we are very proud to collaborate with these countries and ECLAC for this purpose. because the aim is to establish a community of practice of foreign policy and cooperation for feminist purposes, and this will be backed by common practices and the mainstreaming of these policies in dialogue among countries of the region with ECLAC in Germany. We will identify gaps and opportunities for greater gender equality and for a greater representation of women in diplomacy and the political processes. And we've already heard of the importance of this, and also help to that international issues of strategic relevance such as climate change, the agenda for women's space and security, and caring for the planet all may be a benefit with a more mainstreamed and transforming gender approach. To increase the representation of women in decision-making and policies for climate change and protecting the rights of environmental defenders will contribute to a more sustainable future. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your message, Corina. The same as when we began the COP meeting with the Day of Mother Earth and the birthday of the president of the Escazú Agreement from Uruguay. Yes, it was a real pleasure. We wish you a very happy birthday once again. And we will continue to celebrate it together, because I believe that what this region has taught us reminds us always of Valletta Parras, that we must thank life. As the song went. And so here we are. Well, let's continue with Irene Murillo, also a member of the presiding officers as the elected representative of the public. The floor is yours, Irene. Thank you. Good afternoon, and I thank everyone who have resisted after 3 so very intense working days. I think it is well worthwhile to stay to discuss this very important topic for just a little while longer. And I'd also like to thank my colleagues, representative of the public, to allow me to address the meeting during our discussions to approve the decision. I said for me it was a matter of great joy to be discussing this now here at the Escazú Agreement COP. We saw this as a very good first step to work on gender related to the agreement and related to access rights. And I feel very, very happy to once again be talking about this. I'd like to take this moment to highlight the role played by the public, and in particular women in the public, in the work and the process that culminated in this decision. And Maria Fernanda from Mexico already said several of the things that I had wanted to say, but I'm going to link this to a conversation held a few hours back in relation to cooperation. Escazú is an agreement for cooperation in many ways. And one of the forms of cooperation that we did not have time to talk earlier on is cooperation among states and the public. This agreement does have many things that are the result of that joint work and that co-construct. And I would dare say that this decision is one of them. The theme of gender and taking into account is a very important factor in terms of access rights has been put on the table for several years now. And it was the public that began, and as the elected representatives, we have accompanied and supported that process. I was asking now the director of the panel, how can we mainstream this perspective in a better way? And I believe that one of these ways is working on national implementation plans as a first step once again, because the tremendous diversity of women can be seen better and the gaps can be analyzed better in each setting and country that make up this region. And so we see that this work is very important at national level during the implementation. That is where we could really see specific outcomes and affirmative measures that will help reduce the gaps in access to the right to information and justice. And also, and urgently, as we were saying a few days back, to protect the women defenders of human rights and environmental matters.
This leads me to a second important point for the adequate implementation of this vision of gender, which is the implementation of the action plan of defenders, which fortunately we were also able to approve. Well, the states approved. I am mentioning it as a collective. Many of us feel like part of this. And in this implementation, it is also important for gender perspective in a constant exercise that began by putting the plan together and with the discussions of the last forum. It said that for us, this is a very important last step, because even though hopefully the deadline won't be too far, we would like to see a general action plan for Escazú, as others have, other conventions have. So there's an idea. We also see there is great importance in the work that we can do for guidelines, setting guidelines, because Escazú aims to strengthen the capacities of the states, and these guidelines can be extremely important to facilitate the inclusion of gender perspective in the national plans. So, in this sense, we would like to thank the inclusion of these topics. And here are some additional guidelines to what I said at the beginning of my intervention. Again, I would like to thank Mexico for putting this topic on the table, and to the steering committee for preparing this project, this decision, which was finally approved. I'd like to thank UN Women, as they opened a space for a very rich conversation a few hours ago, or before we approved the decision. It was a group of women from the public, and we had truly enriching conversation, so thank you. I'd also like to thank the other agencies that have offered their support for the implementation of this decision. We are all aware of the fact that it implies a lot of work. It involves a lot of work, and we would like to also offer them our capacities. A few moments ago, we were wondering how to do this well and fast. The answer is given by the agreement. with the significant participation of the public. So here we are, the public, the women that form part of this public can support each other. We can support you, but we need you to support us as well so we can do this. Thank you for this wonderful space.
Muchísimas gracias a Irene Murillo por una respuesta.
Thank you to Irene Murillo for a very clear answer with a full participation of the public, very significant one as the agreement calls for. And Nidia Pesantes, representative of UN Women in Bolivia, who will speak in representation of the Regional Office of UN Women for the Americas and the Caribbean. Thank you, dear Ana. I am taking note on the phone. Please don't think that I am chatting. I'm just taking notes. Computer's too heavy. I'd like to thank Mexico and ECLAC for organizing this event. We would like to thank with all our hearts the states that take the baton and exercise leadership and help carry other countries and make them part again of this process of change and transformation, because that is what gender focus is about. And intergovernmental, because we put at the service of change and not only of the technical matrices where we simply check off things, but when we're talking about lives, it is key. We thank the public, of course. Irene, thank you very much. Thank you to the defenders, especially the defenders that we were with and had the possibility to delve into such essential topics, to talk about the agreement so that this can be an engine for change. So in terms of the plans, I think that in gratitude with Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Antigua, Barbuda, it's key because they have just left us with key milestones to move forward with the guidelines and the other agencies. And with this, I would like to begin, Paula, by stressing some of the topics that you have presented in your proposal. A diagnose and we need to see what the differentiating factors are, those that we talk about as women. And sometimes the state doesn't identify it, so it seems like a bit of an exaggeration. It is about understanding basic topics or matters such as control and use of our bodies as women. That is at the core of decision making. Sometimes it's not in the hands of women, but they are the ones who generate this whole process of discrimination that has led us to the point we find ourselves in. When we collect data on identifying gender gaps, which is extremely important, we need to have spaces for women and men and children, youth, because it helps us have a deeper conversation. So data and this quantitative analysis of what's happening with respect to men, women, and the different diversities is extremely important, as Paola mentioned. The identification of institutionality. It's not simply about having a minister of the environment to be working on gender violence, but it is about articulation, about all working together so that these factors that are hindering women's actions can disappear and give way to a state that makes change possible. It's not about all institutions working on the same thing, but how to articulate in order to work together to overcome and bridge these gaps that we've identified with the information that we've collected in this diagnosis process. This is essential for work, as we said a moment ago, and also violence. So the work of women is devalued socially and economically. We all know this, but it is not known by the member states or the state parties and other states, and by the organizations of human rights defense and others, the social movements to change the world and the situation we find ourselves in. Many don't know this, so it is naturalized, this devaluation of work, and in the case of rurality, it generates money. And when we carry out domestic work in terms of production, it generates income. And I have been shown a little red paper. So we have data, articulating mechanisms, and spaces for diversity, systematization of these processes for decision making. In the case of Antigua and Barbuda, if women are not there, decision making will be biased, and this is extremely important as a starting point. And the perspectives are about not simply being better or worse than men, but we have been educated in a different manner, and we have placed our eyes on different things. So we cannot simply try to fly with one wing. It's not possible. We need to work on eliminating bias. Colombia said it. We're talking about the defenders of human rights and of life. So why the agreement? Why the importance of including gender perspective? Because people are being killed while they kill the environment. So this lack of care of the environment is also related to the lack of care of vital elements. Women take care of the earth, of boys, girls, women, the elderly, etc. We have been given the role of care. We didn't say this. Society, when we woke up in this century or last century, we already had hundreds or thousands of years with this burden of care. And it's not about women wanting to stop caring. It is a barrier that restricts possibilities to participate. And this care that we have been given shouldn't be an element that makes possible persecution, violence, and death. And to conclude with Mexico, this means work. Putting this into 1, 2, 3, and having the states launch themselves into a transformative process will take time. Not just time, but lobbying, conversation, sensitization, and it will take time to go back to the ABCs of what gender is in these sustainable development processes. It will take a lot of work because we need to go back to what is life, what is alive, because with so much furniture and computers and finance, we've moved away from our essence, our being, and the being of nature. Thank you.
Diagnóstico, datos, mecanismos.
Diagnose data, mechanisms, work, and the guidelines that will be prepared with how to make all this better and faster. And we will continue thanks to UN Women and Maite Gonzalez, head of the UN Team for Conservation and International Union for Conservation of Nature. Thank you, Ana. Thank you to the entire team. And to the COP, I only have 3 minutes, so I will only express my deep, deep thanks. I would like to echo what Antigua and Barbuda mentioned, and GIZ, and now Nidia, around the importance of production and the improvement of the use of data that are broken down by gender and sex. You know, we're talking about life, and data say that 1 out of every 10 defenders murdered are women. And the violence that women face is different from that faced by men, because they also run the risk of suffering gender violence. So it is a double burden on that front. I'd like to call your attention to the fact that this data is being collected in Latin America in a systematic fashion by the Mesoamerican Initiative of Women Defenders, which we must recognize. the more recent investigations carried out by UCN and that we presented in a brief document within the context of the celebration of the International Day of Women, which I'd invite you to read when you're insomniac. Reaching gender parity in environmental leadership is still far from being achieved. And these advances have existed, but they're slow, and they're increasingly slow. Research shows that, in essence, women are absent from these positions of decision-making in the ministries of the environment and ministries related to the environment, and the trajectory of being able to access those decision-making positions would take time. And data prove that it would take hundreds of years for us to reach parity. I would just wanted to stress the fact that it needs to be participative, not just about committees, in order to make that connection, like Antigua and Barbuda said. And to answer Anna's question on how to do it well and fast and in a systematic fashion, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, what we do well is we do things on site, and we do it with projects. And there are different kinds of projects that echo what the Escazú Agreement wants. For example, projects that are directly oriented to attacking violence against women in the environment. And for this, we already have a financial institution that supports it.
But this is open to receive support from everybody. This is specifically directed to this. We have today launched a new cycle of proposals where we have mentioned that a project in the region in Guatemala has been chosen, and it is sad, as there's such a demand and very little possibility to respond, that these are all elements and examples that really establish a path. For example, in Guatemala, working with a cooperative of women within the cooperative, make it visible which is violence against women and that they can participate with men. And I saw the sign, I will be finishing soon. Another specific way of ending this is supporting the national plans. There is much data that exists in the countries of the region. Therefore, the gender gap analysis in climate change done in the region can really be helpful. We have the plan that was done in Ecuador and that was launched in Guatemala. I think there are opportunities that are very clear and that take more than 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you to Maute Gonzalez from the IUCN. We have an agreement with ECLAC in the protection of diversity, the Escazú Agreement, in climate change, and for reminding us the importance of this happening in the different territories that will happen in the different areas, and to remind us that we did not start from zero. There are changes, there are opportunities, and much has been done. We will continue with our last panelist, Maria Eugenia Di Paola, coordinator of the UNDP program in Argentina and in representation of the regional office of the UNDP. Thank you very much, Anna. It is an honor being here. And I really thank ECLAC's participation of Mexico's invitation as well. And I really thank having been able to be part of this COP, and yesterday have been able to be there when the decision project was dealt with. And I would like to go back to some words that I shared yesterday without making it too long or taking too much time. by representing UNDP and my colleagues from the regional UNDP. I would like to greet the representatives of each country, the agencies, UN Women, UNEP, other agencies of the United Nations that were also there, UNICEF, ACNUR, all organizations and representatives of the organizations that are here, the youth that are working very hard in acknowledging rights. And there is a very important element that was constantly mentioned, and that is and is related to the regional plan that was approved yesterday. It is the acknowledgement of women as caring for nature and defenders, human rights defenders. So this custody that is considered in the Human Development Report of the UNDP is defined as the empowerment of people through the care of nature and is together with aspirations of social justice, the increase of freedom and people in their own lives for the current generations and the future generations. It is very important to have the decision making that we obtained or reached, because the lack of knowledges in the different barriers that men and women are confronting is establishing the patterns of exclusion, creating new inequalities. Yet also previously we heard access to internet as well, land ownership, that only between 8 and 30% of women are landowners. These are all factors that are very limiting in participation of environmental decision process. And what the colleague from IUCN was expressing, how alarming there's a double burden of violence. It's gender violence and environmental violence, where statistics also are concerned about that tremendous element. This is why the implementation of the Escazú Agreement represents an opportunity to tackle the opportunities to promote access to technology, effective participation of women and rural activities, as well as the indigenous participation. It is in this sense, and given the experience shared, there are many important aspects all related to the differentiated contributions of women as change agents, contributing to environmental aspects and resilience. It is in this sense that the importance of designing information process and participation that are integrating the gender perspective and that are fundamental in terms of effective environmental justice. Therefore, in our region, women and girls that are actively involved in the responsible use and the protection of the environment, which is essential for defenders in human rights and environment, and the approach of inequalities is an essential element, as they are not paths that are completely separated. It's economic autonomy or gender violence, but rather the way that it is comprehensively dealt with involving the environmental topic. It will be resulting in an approach that will be contributing to this perspective of an integrated care. And to close, clearly, we know that this decision involving us in working with guidelines will be representing a different opportunity, and that we're not starting from zero. The implementation plans, the programs, the projects from the UNDP, we are working with governments, with the different sectors and the organizations in a view or perspective of integrating gender perspective with the climate crisis, with the climate plans at level of involving the gender issues in the strategies of biodiversity, as well as in everything stated related to comprehensive management of residues and substances. All of this just to express that we have ahead of us very hard work, but given the task that the different organizations are carrying out, as well as the parties or the agencies, and the activity done in the connection of these topics, we're not starting from zero. And the Escazú Agreement has been created by the citizens. This decision was started, as expressed by Irene, with the public and the parties and the agencies. We have a tremendous opportunity to effectively have women, men, the diversities all be able to participate in managing and conserving resources with equitable access to information and justice. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria Eugenia Di Paola from UNDP, for reminding us of all the opportunities and progress that exist at national level. I would like to mention that one of the points of the resolution is to ask the parties to promote the contact of Escazú in regional and international fora where there is gender equality being searched for, as well as the synergy of the different agendas. It was already mentioned in the opening ceremony, the differences or the activities of biodiversity, the COP in Brazil next year, the regional conference on women that will be held in Mexico. So this is a region that will have much multilateral activity. Chile is already reciting ECOSOC, a topic that I believe is tremendously important on how we are working on, and it is why our executive secretary is in New York, which is funding for development. We are confronted to a tremendous challenge, as we have already expressed. In ECLAC, we are in a trap of low growth, very little fiscal area for countries, and we need to have justice mechanisms, but we need resources. The Escazú Agreement needs resources in all these senses. I have two information to present. One is we have a coffee break. We have our interpreters have to leave, and we have to as well. Number two is that for those of you that are leaving, please turn in your IDs and you will be receiving a little token of appreciation. Therefore, we will continue our conversation outside of this room, but we wanted to highlight some of the key elements to close and thus be able to continue talking later on. One is the importance of this decision to be multi-scalable, that there should be multilateralism, that this should occur in national plans, and it should occur in the territories. There is a reaffirmation of equality and non-discrimination, meaning that there are many different spheres enabling Escazú Agreement to occur, and one of the first ones is full participation of women and their diversity in terms of the public defenders and political leaders, as well as in all the areas of development, as already expressed by the executive secretary. And this is why this has been so important between the Sustainable Development Department and Human Settlements as part of the Secretariat with the Division of Gender Issues on how to be able to articulate the Escazú Agreement with the gender agenda, and at national level, the ministries sectorial ministries, with the environment and other mechanisms for the progress of women. We're looking for deep, ambitious, and comprehensive transformation. When I ask how to go faster, how to do it better, I am fully convinced that we can obtain short-term results and to establish the basis for a change that we know it is far deeper and far longer in our region, and thus be able to obtain this idea that we have expressed in the regional conference on women, which is to move forward to the society of care in a sustainable recovery with equality towards peace nowadays in the region, as well as interdependency, where we have clearly been taught that indigenous people, indigenous women, this idea of well-being or living properly that exists between the planet and human life. Therefore, we need structural responses that are ambitious and, as you were expressing in almost all of the speakers, starting with the plans and roadmaps of national implementation. I believe, and we have been supporting the work of the presiding officers, which has Uruguay, Antigua, Barbuda, Argentina, Mexico, St. Lucia, and the representative of the public, where this decision should not come in late, but rather will start exactly the same day and in the same time of the basic decisions of the Escazú Agreement. And undoubtedly, the path is complicated, and we were hearing it from Chancellor Bárcena. We start with the talent of women and their organizations, but be careful. This is a cause of all of humankind. It is not only the work of women. So here, men, the organizations, the social organizations, the public policies, this is a task of all of humankind that involves us and gathers us together with a sense of urgency, where all have much to provide. One of the first things that we would like to provide is a safe environment for human rights defenses in all areas, but specifically in environmental areas, and to prevent discrimination and violence, which is defending those that are defending the rights. Many times, and this is the experience in the region, where women that are defending rights, they're not even considering themselves human rights defenders because they do not know about the instruments of defense. They are community leaders, environmental leaders, and there is data in which to work with in the systems of protection. And we should consider that this is a risk for life, and for many of the defenders of human rights, for many defenders as well, that they lose their health, and many times they lose their jobs and their space, their local space, as they have to leave their environment, and we have to tackle it.
The interpreters would like to thank their listeners. Our working hours have ended. We will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Que la región está emprendiendo para avanzar hacia el derecho al cuidado, para avanzar hacia un derecho a un ambiente saludable, y es una oportunidad para articular iniciativas innovadoras en materia de política exterior feminista y de política de cooperación internacional para el desarrollo, camino que hemos iniciado y que este es una de sus primeras actividades, pero sin duda es una obligación de todos los estados. De todos los estados, ojalá que todos pronto parte del Acuerdo de Escazú, pero aún así, los que aún no son parte del Acuerdo de Escazú tienen obligaciones y compromisos ya establecidos en el marco internacional. Somos una región que avanzó en la ley, somos una región que avanzó en la paridad de género en el mundo educativo, como señalaba el secretario ejecutivo, y ahora es una región que quiere avanzar hacia la igualdad sustantiva, hacia la igualdad de resultados. Desde la CEPAL, con Carlos, y con todas las divisiones vamos a estar trabajando para estas sinergias, para estos avances colaborativos, para avanzar hacia un futuro más justo y sostenible para todos y todas. Y para cerrar esta importante jornada, es un gusto para mí pasarle la palabra a Jimena Mariscal de Alba, que es la coordinadora, ni más ni menos, de la política exterior feminista de México. Adelante, Jim.
Muchas gracias, Ana, por tus palabras y tu excelente moderación, y muchas gracias, Carlos, por ayudarnos a tener este evento. Les prometo que voy a cerrar en un minuto. Para que sigamos esta conversación. Creo que nos ha quedado claro que esta es la primera de muchas conversaciones que vamos a seguir teniendo sobre este tema. Entonces quiero agradecerle a Corina, a Irene, a Nidia, a Maite y a María Eugenia por sus participaciones y su apoyo incansable para que avancemos juntas hacia la verdadera transversalización de la perspectiva de género en todos los temas y el reconocimiento de la participación de las mujeres en la elaboración y en la consolidación no solo del Acuerdo de Escazú, sino de esta decisión y de los planes de acción que se han aprobado. Muchas gracias y muy especiales a Paula, a Ana María, a Maurín, a María Fernanda por acompañarnos en este espacio, compartiendo los retos y prácticas en la implementación del acuerdo con una perspectiva de género. Y con lo que queremos resaltar en esto es la relevancia de impulsar la cooperación para fortalecer los mecanismos como aquellos propuestos por el acuerdo de Escazú. Y desde México promovemos esta visión con determinación en línea con nuestra política exterior feminista, que, como lo decía nuestra canciller Alicia Bárcena, implica un enfoque más humanista, pacifista y de protección a los derechos humanos. Quiero dejarlos nada más con dos mensajes que los hemos repetido a lo largo de esta jornada, pero como lo decía Maureen, we have to keep talking about it hasta que nos hagan caso. Entonces, primero, y estoy aprovechando también que este conversatorio va a quedar grabado y que ya no habrá vuelta atrás. La decisión de transversalizar la perspectiva de género implica incluir la visión de género, la visión de las mujeres en todas las decisiones de la implementación del Acuerdo de Escazú, pero no solamente en la implementación, sino también las decisiones que se tomen en la propia conferencia de los estados parte, en la elaboración de los planes y programas de la conferencia de Escazú y también de los planes y programas de implementación en los estados, y implica que las mujeres estén en la mesa de la toma de decisiones, también lo decía Maureen muy bien, implica que estemos ahí, pero verdaderamente tomando decisiones. Esta decisión de transversalización de la perspectiva de género no se ejecuta en el vacío ni de una manera independiente, se tiene que articular, justo como lo decía Nidia, se tiene que articular con todos los demás temas. Y bueno, para esto vamos a contar con una guía de transversalización de la perspectiva de género del Acuerdo de Escazú. Muchas gracias a ONU Mujeres y a todas las agencias que nos van a ayudar a hacerlo. Todos y todas nos vamos a sumar a hacer este trabajo, y esto es verdaderamente la política exterior feminista en acción. Muchas gracias y buenas tardes a todos.
Listo, y ahora sí les invitamos a seguir compartiendo, conversando y tomando algo juntos y juntas.